Captain Jake Morrison stared at the display screen showing nothing but empty space and distant stars. The exploration ship Horizon's Edge had been traveling for 3 months toward the edge of known space where no human had ever gone before. His crew was getting restless, and Jake could not blame them because they had found nothing interesting during their long journey. Dr. Lisa Hayes looked up from her science station with excitement in her eyes. She had been the chief science officer on this mission for 2 years, and Jake trusted her judgment completely. Lisa pointed at her readings and called out to the bridge crew that she was detecting something very strange ahead of them. The energy signature was unlike anything in their database, and it seemed to be getting stronger as they moved closer to it. Commander Sam Parker, who served as their security chief, moved to his tactical station and began running scans to make sure they were not flying into any danger. Lieutenant Amy Foster at the communications station reported that all frequencies were clear, but she was picking up some kind of background humming that did not match any known technology. Jake ordered the ship to slow down and approach whatever was out there with extreme caution. As they got closer, the main screen showed something that made the entire bridge crew fall silent. Floating in the darkness of space was a massive structure made of what looked like living crystal. It was easily 10 times larger than their ship, and it glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The crystal structure was beautiful, beyond anything Jake had ever seen, and it was clearly not natural. Someone or something had built this incredible creation and placed it here at the edge of the galaxy. Dr. Hayes ran every scan she could think of, but her instruments were giving her readings that made no sense at all. The structure appeared to be both mechanical and biological at the same time. Amy Foster suddenly jumped in her seat as her communication board lit up with activity. She reported that the structure was sending them some kind of signal, but it was not in any language or format they recognized. The signal seemed to be trying to establish contact, but their universal translator was having trouble making sense of it. Jake made the decision to try responding to the signal using basic mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should be able to understand. Within seconds of sending their response, the crystal structure began to change. The blue light grew brighter, and the entire structure started to shift and move like it was alive. Then something incredible happened that would change everything Jake and his crew thought they knew about the universe. The crystal structure sent them a message in perfect English using words and phrases that sounded completely natural. The voice that came through their speakers was warm and welcoming, like an old friend greeting them after a long journey. The voice introduced itself as Elder Zeth Mori of the Valthani and said they had been waiting for the humans to arrive. Jake looked around at his crew and saw the same confusion and amazement on their faces that he was feeling. How could these beings know English, and why had they been waiting for humans specifically? Elder Zeth Mori seemed to sense their confusion and explained that the Valthani had been watching humanity for a very long time. They knew all about human culture and language because they had been observing Earth and its people for thousands of years. The Elder said they had been waiting for this moment when humans would finally develop space travel and venture out to find them. Dr. Hayes asked the obvious question about why the Valthani had been watching humanity and why they seemed so interested in making contact now. The answer that came back through their speakers made Jake feel like the universe had just turned upside down. Elder Zeth Mori told them that humans were not strangers to the Valthani, but were actually their family. The crystal structure moved closer to their ship, and Jake could see that it was not just one large object, but thousands of smaller crystal beings working together. Each crystal seemed to be alive and aware, and they were all focused on the human ship with what could only be described as joy and excitement. Elder Zeth Mori continued to explain that the Valthani were the oldest species in the galaxy and had been alive since before most of the stars were born. They had watched countless other species rise and fall over millions of years, but humans were special to them in a way that no other species had ever been. Amy Foster was recording everything as the Elder spoke about how the Valthani had been protecting humanity throughout history. They had quietly turned away asteroid impacts that would have destroyed Earth and had prevented other hostile alien species from discovering human civilization before they were ready to defend themselves. Commander Parker remained focused on his security duties and asked why the Valthani had chosen to reveal themselves now instead of continuing to watch from a distance. The Elder explained that humanity had reached a point in their development where they were ready to learn the truth about their place in the galaxy and their connection to the Valthani people. The truth that Elder Zethmori was about to reveal would shock Jake and his crew beyond anything they could have imagined. The Valthani were not just friendly aliens who had taken an interest in humanity, but were actually the ancient ancestors of the human race itself. Billions of years ago, before they had transformed into their current crystal form, the Valthani had been organic beings very much like humans. Dr. Hayes felt her scientific mind struggling to process what she was hearing as the Elder explained how the Valthani had seeded many worlds with their genetic material before undergoing their great transformation. Earth had been one of those worlds, and humans were the descendants of that ancient seeding process which made them the biological children of the Valthani. Jake realized that this first contact was not really a meeting between two different species, but a family reunion that had been millions of years in the making. The Valthani had been waiting patiently for their human children to grow up and develop enough to join them among the stars. As the horizon's edge floated in space next to the magnificent crystal structure, Jake Morrison knew that nothing would ever be the same again for humanity. They were not alone in the universe, and they had just discovered that they belonged to the oldest and most powerful family in the entire galaxy. Dr. Lisa Hayes could not sleep after what Elder Zethmori had told them about humanity being descendants of the Valthani. She spent the entire night in the science lab running tests on the data they had collected from the crystal beings. Everything she discovered seemed to support the incredible claim that humans and the Valthani were related in ways that went beyond anything she had learned in all her years of study. The Valthani had invited a small team from the horizon's edge to board their crystal structure and learn more about their shared history. Jake Morrison chose Dr. Hayes to lead the scientific investigation, while Commander Sam Parker would handle security and Lieutenant Amy Foster would document everything they learned. When they transported over to the Valthani structure, Lisa was amazed to find that she could breathe normally even though they were inside what appeared to be a living crystal formation. The walls around them glowed with soft light and seemed to respond to their presence by becoming brighter as they moved through the corridors. Elder Zethmori appeared before them as a tall crystal being that somehow managed to look both ancient and welcoming at the same time. The Elder explained that what Lisa was seeing was only a small part of the vast network of Valthani consciousness that existed throughout their crystal matrix. Each individual Valthani was connected to all the others in a way that allowed them to share memories and experiences across their entire species. The Elder led them to what could only be described as a memory chamber where the walls were covered with crystal formations that contained the recorded history of both the Valthani and humanity. Lisa watched in wonder as the crystals began to glow and project images that showed the ancient past of both species. The story that unfolded before them was almost too incredible to believe, but the evidence was overwhelming. Billions of years ago, the Valthani had been organic beings who lived on a beautiful world orbiting a star that was beginning to die. They had achieved incredible advances in science and technology, but they faced extinction when their sun started to expand and burn away their planet's atmosphere. Rather than simply flee to another world, the Valthani had chosen to undergo what they called the Great Becoming. This was a process that transformed their organic bodies into living crystal that could survive in the vacuum of space and would last for billions of years. The transformation allowed them to preserve their consciousness and their culture while gaining the ability to travel between the stars without needing ships or life support systems. Dr. Hayes realized that the transformation had come with a price, because the Valthani could no longer reproduce in the traditional sense. Before undergoing the Great Becoming, they had sent out ships to dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy carrying their genetic material and the seeds of life itself. Their hope was that their biological legacy would continue even after they had transformed into crystal beings. Most of these seeded worlds had failed to develop complex life, but Earth had been different. The genetic material that the Valthani had placed on Earth billions of years ago had combined with the natural evolution of life on the planet to eventually produce human beings. This meant that every human alive was carrying Valthani DNA, and was literally a descendant of the crystal beings who now surrounded them. Amy Foster was recording everything as Elder Zeth Mori showed them images of Earth throughout its history. The Valthani had been watching and occasionally intervening to protect human civilization from threats that would have destroyed it before it could mature. They had deflected asteroids that would have caused mass extinction events and had prevented other alien species from discovering Earth. During humanity's vulnerable early development, Lisa learned that the Valthani had also been subtly influencing human development in positive ways. Many of the greatest achievements in human science and art had been inspired by Valthani broadcasts that reached the minds of talented humans during sleep. The mathematical principles that humans used were based on Valthani understanding of the universe, and even human music contained harmonies that matched ancient Valthani songs. Commander Parker asked why the Valthani had waited so long to make contact instead of revealing themselves earlier in human history. Elder Zeth Mori explained that they needed to be certain that humanity could stand on its own before meeting their ancient family. The Valthani had learned from watching other species that too much help too early could prevent a young civilization from developing the strength and independence it needed to survive in a dangerous galaxy. The Elder showed them images of other species that the Valthani had tried to help in the past. Some had become completely dependent on Valthani assistance and had never developed their own technology or culture. Others had been overwhelmed by the knowledge that ancient beings were watching over them and had either worshipped the Valthani as gods or had become paralyzed by fear of disappointing their protectors. Humanity was different because humans had developed space travel and had begun exploring the galaxy on their own initiative. This showed the Valthani that their human descendants had inherited the curiosity and courage that had once driven the Valthani themselves to explore the cosmos. The time had finally come for the family reunion that both species had been moving toward for billions of years. Dr. Hayes made another incredible discovery when Elder Zeth Mori allowed her to interface directly with the Valthani memory crystals. She found that human brains were naturally compatible with Valthani technology in ways that no other species had ever been. When she touched the crystal surface, she could access vast libraries of knowledge and could communicate with the Valthani at the speed of thought. The experience was overwhelming but also wonderful as Lisa felt herself connected to minds that had witnessed the birth and death of countless stars. She could sense the love and pride that the Valthani felt for humanity, and their joy at finally being able to welcome their biological children into the greater galactic community. Engineer Pete Collins, who had remained on the horizon's edge, reported that their ship systems were beginning to resonate with the Valthani crystal structure in strange ways. The resonance was actually improving their technology and making their computers run more efficiently. It appeared that human technology had been unconsciously following Valthani principles, even though humans had never known about their connection to the crystal beings. As the day ended and the human team prepared to return to their ship, Elder Zeth Mori gave them a warning along with all the wonderful revelations. The galaxy was not a peaceful place, and there were other ancient species that would not be happy to learn that humanity had emerged as a spacefaring civilization. The Valthani had been protecting Earth from these threats, but now that humans were spreading across the stars, they would eventually attract the attention of beings who might see them as enemies rather than family. Admiral John Patterson received Captain Jake Morrison's report about first contact with the Valthani and immediately called an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Coalition. The news that humanity had ancient relatives who had been protecting Earth for billions of years was both exciting and terrifying for the leaders of human space. Dr. Helen Cross was chosen to serve as the chief diplomat for humanity's first official contact with an alien species. She had spent her entire career studying interspecies communication and had written dozens of papers about how humans might react when they finally encountered other intelligent life. None of her theories had prepared her for the reality that aliens would turn out to be family members who already knew everything about human culture and history. The Valthani sent an invitation for select humans to visit their home system of Ethermore, which was located deep in unexplored space beyond the rim of the galaxy. Captain Morrison and his crew from the Horizon's Edge were chosen to be humanity's first ambassadors to an alien world. Dr. Cross joined the mission along with a team of scientists and military advisors who would help humanity understand their place in the larger galactic community. The journey to Ethermore took 2 weeks, even with the improved navigation systems that the Valthani had shared with the human ship. As they approached the alien system, Morrison and his crew saw something that took their breath away. Instead of planets orbiting a star, they found a collection of massive crystal structures that floated in perfect formation around a glowing energy source that provided light and warmth to the entire system. Each crystal world was different and served a specific purpose in Valthani society. Some were devoted to preserving the memories and history of their ancient civilization, while others were focused on scientific research that spanned millions of years. The largest crystal structure contained the consciousness of the eldest Valthani, who had been alive since before the transformation and remembered what it was like to be an organic being. Dr. Lisa Hayes was amazed to discover that the Valthani had maintained detailed records of every major event in human history. They had files about every human civilization from ancient Egypt to the founding of the first space colonies. The crystal beings had watched human art and music develop over thousands of years and had celebrated each breakthrough that brought humanity closer to joining them among the stars. Elder Zethmori showed the human visitors through the memory halls where they could see recordings of their own ancestors going about their daily lives throughout history. The Valthani had been especially interested in human creativity and had carefully documented the development of human literature, painting, and music. They seemed to take parental pride in every human achievement, no matter how small. Amy Foster discovered that her ability to interface with Valthani technology was not unique among humans. When other members of the diplomatic team tried connecting with the crystal systems, they found that all humans shared a natural compatibility with Valthani technology. This was further proof that the genetic connection between the two species was real and significant. Commander Sam Parker was impressed by the defensive capabilities of the Valthani home system, but he was also concerned about the threats that Elder Zethmori had mentioned. The crystal beings explained that the galaxy was home to several other ancient species that were not as friendly as the Valthani. These hostile aliens had been expanding their territory millions of years and would eventually notice that humanity had emerged as a spacefaring civilization. The most dangerous threat came from something called the Zirithi Collective, which was a machine intelligence that consumed organic life to fuel its expansion across the galaxy. The Zirithi had been growing stronger for centuries and had already destroyed dozens of young civilizations that had tried to explore space without proper protection. The Valthani had been secretly fighting the Zirithi for thousands of years to prevent them from reaching Earth. Another threat came from the Shadowkin Empire, which was ruled by dark beings from the galactic core who believed that organic life was a disease that needed to be eliminated. The Shadowkin had powerful weapons and vast fleets, but they had been held back by a combination of Valthani diplomacy and military action. The emergence of humanity into galactic politics would definitely attract Shadowkin attention. Dr. Cross realized that humanity was about to be thrust into conflicts that had been raging for millions of years. The Valthani offered to continue protecting their human family, but they also warned that other species would view humanity as either potential allies or dangerous enemies. The decisions that humans made in the coming years would determine whether they survived long enough to take their place among the galactic powers. Commander Rick Hayes, who was Dr. Lisa Hayes' brother, had been assigned to lead the first joint human Valthani defense initiative. He worked with Valthani military specialists to understand the weapons and tactics that would be needed to defend human space from ancient enemies. The crystal beings were willing to share their technology, but they wanted humans to learn how to use it properly rather than becoming dependent on Valthani protection. The defense technology that the Valthani offered was beyond anything humans had ever imagined. Their weapons were powered by crystalline energy cores that could channel the power of stars, and their ships could travel faster than light without the massive engines that human vessels required. Most importantly, their defensive systems could create energy shields that were strong enough to protect entire planets from attack. Jake Morrison spent hours learning about Valthani military history and was amazed by the battles they had fought to protect young civilizations throughout the galaxy. The crystal beings were peaceful by nature, but they were also fierce warriors when defending their family or their principles. They had held back the darkness for millions of years while waiting for their human children to grow strong enough to help them. The visit to Aethermore lasted for 2 months, and every day brought new revelations about the connection between humans and Valthani. Dr. Hayes discovered that human emotions actually helped the crystal beings remember what it was like to feel joy, anger, and love. The Valthani had maintained their intelligence and wisdom through their transformation, but they had lost some of their ability to experience the full range of emotions that made life meaningful. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth with news of their incredible discoveries, Elder Zethmori gave them a final gift. The Elder presented them with a small crystal that contained a fragment of Valthani consciousness that would allow instant communication between Earth and Aethermore. This would ensure that humanity would never again be alone in the universe, and would always have their ancient family available to provide guidance and support when it was needed most. The warnings that Elder Zethmori had given about ancient enemies became reality much sooner than anyone had expected. Admiral Kate Fleming was commanding the defense of the outer colonies when her sensors detected something massive approaching from deep space. The energy signatures were unlike anything in human records, but they matched the descriptions that the Valthani had given of Zirathi. Collective Technology. Captain Jake Morrison received an emergency call to return to the front lines with his enhanced ship and Valthani crystal technology. The Horizon's Edge had been upgraded with crystal energy cores and consciousness interface, systems that allowed human and Valthani minds to work together during combat. Morrison knew that this battle would test whether the alliance between the two species was strong enough to survive a real war. The Zirathi fleet was enormous and consisted of hundreds of mechanical ships that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Each vessel was covered with sensors and weapons that moved independently as they scanned for targets. Dr. Lisa Hayes analyzed the enemy technology and realized that the machines were not just following programmed instructions, but were actually thinking and adapting to human defensive strategies in real time. Senator Frank Miller led a group of human politicians who questioned whether humanity should be fighting this war at all. He argued that the conflict between the Valthani and the Zirathi had been going on for millions of years, and that humans had no business getting involved in ancient grudges. Miller worried that humanity would become nothing more than cannon fodder in a war they did not understand. The political debate was interrupted when the Zirathi made their intentions clear by attacking human civilian colonies instead of military targets. The machine ships descended on peaceful settlements and began consuming everything they found, including the people who lived there. The Zirathi were not just conquering territory, but were literally eating entire worlds to fuel their expansion. Across the galaxy. Admiral Fleming coordinated the defense while Captain Morrison led a joint strike force that included both human ships and Valthani crystal vessels. The battle was unlike anything humans had ever experienced because the enemy could adapt to their tactics faster than any living opponent. Every time the human fleet tried a new strategy, the Zirathi machines would counter it within minutes. Dr. Helen Cross was monitoring the battle from Earth when she realized that the attack was actually a test. The Zirathi were not just trying to destroy human colonies, but were studying how humans and Valthani would react when their alliance was under pressure. Other ancient species were watching to see whether the bond between the two civilizations was real, or whether humans would abandon their crystal family when things became difficult. Commander, Rick Hayes discovered that human tactical thinking was actually more effective against the Zirathi than traditional Valthani strategies. The crystal beings had become too logical and predictable during their millions of years of existence, while humans still retained the ability to make decisions based on intuition and emotional responses. The machines could not adapt to human unpredictability as easily as they could counter. Valthani Precision, Lieutenant Amy Foster, made a breakthrough when she realized that her ability to interface with Valthani technology could be enhanced during combat situations. When she connected her mind to the crystal systems on the horizon's edge, she found that she could coordinate human and Valthani forces at the speed of thought. Her discovery allowed the Allied fleet to respond to Zirathi attacks faster than the machines could adapt. The turning point in the battle came when the Zirathi specifically targeted a human hospital ship that was evacuating wounded civilians from the attacked colonies. The machine fleet ignored military targets and focused all their firepower on the defenseless medical vessel. This action finally convinced even Senator Miller that the war was not about ancient grudges but about the survival of all organic life in the galaxy. Captain Morrison led a desperate rescue mission to save the hospital ship and its passengers. His enhanced vessel was able to use Valthani shielding technology to protect the civilians while human fighters provided cover against the attacking machines. The rescue operation required perfect coordination between human pilots and Valthani defense systems working together as a single unit. Elder Zethmori appeared on the bridge of the horizon's edge during the most critical moment of the battle. The ancient being explained that the Zirathi attack was designed to force the Valthani to choose between protecting themselves and saving their human family. If the crystal beings abandoned humanity to save their own civilization, then other species would know that the alliance was weak and could be broken. Dr. Hayes realized that the test was even more complex than they had understood. The galaxy's ancient powers were not just measuring the strength of the human-Valthani bond, but were also evaluating whether humanity deserved to survive as an independent species. If humans proved that they could only win battles with Valthani help, then other civilizations would view them as parasites rather than equals. The solution came when Amy Foster discovered that she could share her enhanced interface abilities with other humans through the Valthani Crystal Network. Soon dozens of human officers throughout the fleet were able to connect their minds with crystal technology and coordinate their actions at superhuman speeds. The humans were not just using Valthani tools, but were actually enhancing them with human creativity and intuition. The combined human-Valthani fleet launched a counterattack that caught the Zirathi completely off guard. Instead of following predictable military tactics, the Alliance used strategies that combined Valthani wisdom with human imagination. The machines found themselves unable to adapt fast enough to counter attacks that were based on artistic inspiration rather than logical planning. Commander Parker led a boarding party that captured one of the smaller Zirathi vessels and discovered that the machines were controlled by a central intelligence that had been studying galactic civilizations for millions of years. The artificial mind had detailed files on every species it had encountered, but its records on humanity were incomplete because humans had developed so quickly after making contact with the Valthani. The battle ended when Captain Morrison used his ship's enhanced crystal weapons to destroy the Zirathi command vessel. The loss of their central intelligence caused the entire machine fleet to become confused and disorganized. The surviving Zirathi ships retreated into deep space, but not before sending a signal that would alert other hostile species that humanity had proven itself to be a dangerous enemy. As the smoke cleared from the battlefield, Admiral Fleming received messages from civilizations throughout the galaxy. Some offered alliance and friendship, while others declared that humanity would be their next target. The victory against the Zirathi had saved human colonies, but it had also announced to the entire galaxy that Earth's children were ready to fight for their place among the stars. The victory over the Zirathi fleet sent ripples across the entire galaxy as news of humanity's courage spread to every corner of known space. Captain Jake Morrison found himself promoted to admiral and placed in command of the first joint Human Valthani Exploration Fleet. The alliance between the two species had proven itself in battle, and now it was time to see what they could accomplish together during peacetime. Elder Zethmori invited the human leadership to witness a ceremony that had not been performed in millions of years. The Valthani were going to formally welcome humanity into the ancient family of spacefaring civilizations and grant them full membership in the Council of Galactic Elders. Dr. Helen Cross would represent humanity at the ceremony, while Admiral Morrison would speak for the military alliance that had saved both species from destruction. The ceremony took place on a neutral world that had been chosen by the galaxy's oldest civilizations as a meeting place for important diplomatic events. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to witness humanity's acceptance into the galactic community. Some had come to offer friendship and alliance, while others wanted to evaluate this new species that had emerged so suddenly from an unknown corner of the galaxy. The Kethver hegemony had remained neutral observers for millions of years, but their ambassador approached Dr. Cross with an offer of membership in their exclusive Council of Ancient Powers. The Kethver were impressed by humanity's ability to enhance Valthani technology rather than simply using it as a crutch. They recognized that humans brought something new to the galaxy that could benefit all civilizations, even the warlike Zorathi. Clans sent representatives to the ceremony because they respected the tactical innovations that humans had demonstrated during the battle against the Zirathi. The Zorathi had been fighting the Machine Collective for thousands of years without achieving the decisive victory that the Human Valthani Alliance had won in a single battle. They wanted to learn human military techniques and offered to share their own warrior traditions in return. Lieutenant Amy Foster discovered that her enhanced ability to interface with Valthani technology was just the beginning of what humans could achieve through their connection to their crystal family. During the ceremony, she was able to link her consciousness with Elder Zethmori and experience memories that went back to the very beginning of Valthani civilization. The experience showed her that humans were not just descendants of the ancient beings, but were actually the key to their continued evolution. Dr. Lisa Hayes made a scientific breakthrough when she realized that human consciousness could help the Valthani develop new abilities that they had lost during their transformation into crystal beings. The ancient species had gained immortality and vast knowledge, but they had sacrificed their ability to grow and change. Contact with human emotions and creativity was allowing them to experience new thoughts and feelings for the first time in millions of years. The ceremony reached its climax when Elder Zethmori performed the ritual of recognition that formally acknowledged humanity as the biological and spiritual heirs of the Valthani legacy. The ancient being spoke words in a language that was older than most of the stars in the galaxy, but every human present understood them perfectly because the meaning was transmitted directly into their minds through the crystal network. Admiral Morrison felt the weight of responsibility as he accepted the ceremonial crystal that would allow humanity to communicate with civilizations throughout the galaxy. The gift was more than just a communication device because it contained fragments of consciousness from every species that had ever joined the galactic community. Humans would now have access to millions of years of accumulated wisdom and knowledge. Commander Rick Hayes had been working with Valthani engineers to design a new type of starship that combined human innovation with crystal technology. The prototype vessel could travel faster than any ship in the galaxy and was equipped with weapons that responded to human determination and willpower. The design would become the template for a new generation of exploration and defense ships that would protect the Alliance for centuries to come. The real celebration began when the formal ceremony ended and representatives from different species began to mingle and share their cultures with the newcomers from Earth. Humans discovered that they had a natural talent for diplomacy because their emotional responses helped other species feel more comfortable and trusting. Several civilizations that had been enemies for thousands of years found themselves able to communicate peacefully for the first time when humans served as mediators. Senator Frank Miller, who had initially opposed human involvement in galactic Affairs became one of the strongest supporters of the Alliance when he saw how other species responded to human leadership. The galaxy had been stagnant for millions of years, with the same ancient powers maintaining the same old conflicts and rivalries. Humanity's arrival was like adding fresh energy to a system that had been running down for far too long. The plans for New Harmony were announced during the celebration as human and Valthani leaders revealed their intention to build a joint world that would serve as a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they worked together. The planet would be constructed using both human engineering and Valthani crystal growing techniques to create a world that was perfectly suited for both organic and crystalline life forms. Dr. Cross became the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council and immediately began working to establish peaceful relationships between species that had been fighting each other for millions of years. Her success in mediating disputes between ancient enemies proved that humans had inherited the Valthani gift for diplomacy along with their genetic material and technological compatibility. The construction of New Harmony took 5 years, but the result was worth the wait. The world featured cities that grew like living organisms while maintaining all the technology needed for advanced civilization. Human children played alongside young Valthani crystals in gardens that bloomed with plants from dozens of different worlds. The sight of the two species living together in perfect harmony convinced many skeptical civilizations that the alliance was genuine and permanent. Admiral Morrison established the Combined Fleet Academy on New Harmony, where human and Valthani officers trained together to defend the galaxy against future threats. The Academy became a model for cooperation that other species began to copy as they realized that diversity and cooperation were more effective than isolation and competition. The story reached its conclusion when the first graduating class of the Academy received their assignments to explore previously unknown regions of the galaxy. These mixed crews of humans and Valthani would carry the message of family and cooperation to civilizations that had never encountered either species before. Elder Zeth Mori watched the graduation ceremony with joy as the ancient dream finally came true and the galaxy became a brighter and more hopeful place, because humanity had found its way home to its cosmic family.